In the heart of an ancient forest, shrouded in the thick mist of an endless night, there's a forgotten road known only to those with the misfortune of its discovery. This tale is of Sam, a weary traveler, whose journey took an ill-fated turn down this very path. Sam was a pragmatic man, grounded in the reality of the tangible world, with little patience for superstitions or ghost stories. His belief was in the concrete, the roar of his engine, the solidity of the asphalt beneath his wheels, the clear, logical maps displayed on his GPS. Yet, on this fateful night, as he ventured to reach his distant home, his world was about to tilt on its axis. It began as an innocuous detour, prompted by a sudden road closure on his usual route. The detour led him through unfamiliar terrain, deeper into the heart of the forest, where the trees grew so dense they seemed to swallow the sky whole. The GPS, once a beacon of direction, now flickered uncertainly before succumbing to an eerie static. Sam's initial irritation gave way to a creeping unease as he noticed the peculiar absence of any sign of life. No other vehicles, no lights from distant homes, not even the usual nocturnal chorus of wildlife. The only sound was the monotonous hum of his car moving through the oppressive darkness. As hours stretched thin and the fuel gauge neared its ominous end, Sam's unease blossomed into a cold dread. The road seemed endless, looping back on itself in a surreal, nightmarish labyrinth. It was then that the anomalies began. First, it was a fleeting shadow, darting just at the edge of the headlight's reach. Too swift to be discerned, Sam attributed it to fatigue, a trick of his weary mind. But then came the whispers, a cacophony of hushed voices that seemed to emanate from the very fog that enveloped his car, speaking in tongues foreign and familiar all at once. Attempting to maintain his sanity, Sam focused on the road until he could no longer ignore the figure that appeared in his rearview mirror, a spectral silhouette, barely more than a wisp of the mist. Its presence was palpable, a cold spot in the night that sent shivers down his spine. Every instinct screamed at him to flee, to escape this phantasmal hitchhiker. But there was nowhere to go but forward, into the heart of the darkness. The final anomaly defied all logic. The road, once an unremarkable stretch of forgotten asphalt, now bore disturbing markings, symbols that glowed faintly with an unearthly light, pulsing in rhythm with the whispers. Each marker seemed to guide him further, deeper, into a part of the forest that felt untouched by time itself, where the air held the weight of ancient, unspoken secrets. As the fuel finally surrendered to the inevitability of its depletion, Sam's car sputtered to a stop. The darkness converged upon him, thick and suffocating, as the whispers grew into an insistent murmur. With the last of his resolve, Sam stepped out into the fog, the cold air biting at his skin, the ground soft and yielding beneath his feet, as if it hadn't felt the weight of a soul in centuries. The story leaves Sam standing at the threshold of the unknown, the forest stretching out before him like a dark, inviting mystery, the whispers beckoning him forward. What lies beyond in the mist? What truths or horrors await him? Remain shrouded in the shadows of the night. A story yet to be continued. nightmare yet to be concluded. As the moon cast a haunting glow over the winding road, the eerie silence of the night was broken only by the soft hum of the car's engine. Michael, a seasoned yet cautious driver, had always found solace in the night's serenity, away from the cacophony of the day. However, tonight was different. The dense fog that clung to the ground seemed to swallow the beam of his headlights, creating an ethereal landscape that felt both surreal and foreboding. Miles from the nearest town, Michael's thoughts wandered to the stories his grandfather used to tell him. Tales of wandering spirits and unexplained phenomena that roamed the roads after dark. He had always dismissed them as mere folk tales, but the isolation of the night made him question his skepticism. As he rounded a sharp bend, his headlights illuminated a figure standing by the roadside, dressed in tattered clothing. The figure's face was obscured by the shadows, and before Michael could react, it vanished into the thin air, leaving no trace behind. A chill ran down his spine, and he questioned whether his eyes had deceived him, or if the stories he had once laughed at held a sliver of truth. Determined to shake off the unsettling encounter, Michael pressed on, the silence of the car offering no comfort. The road seemed to stretch endlessly before him, each mile blending into the next, with only the occasional rustle of the trees to disturb the quiet. As the night deepened, an inexplicable sense of dread began to weigh on him. The once familiar road now felt like a labyrinth, each turn leading him further into an unknown abyss. The boundaries between reality and the tales of old blurred, and Michael found himself glancing nervously into the rearview mirror, half expecting to see something staring back at him. Suddenly, the car's engine sputtered, its steady rhythm giving way to an erratic cough before falling silent, stranded in the darkness, miles from any semblance of civilization. Michael's heart raced as he attempted to restart the engine, to no avail. The oppressive silence of the night enveloped him, punctuated only by the distant howl of the wind. It was then that he heard it, a faint whisper, barely discernible over the rustling leaves, calling his name from the darkness beyond the road. The sound seemed to beckon him, drawing him towards an unseen force that lay hidden in the shroud of night. With the car as his only sanctuary, Michael was torn between the primal urge to flee and the paralyzing fear that rooted him to his seat. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, as if the night itself was alive with voices of the unseen. As he wrestled with his fear, the story was left hanging in the air. A tale paused at the precipice of the unknown, waiting to be continued. As the night deepened, Jake found himself growing more anxious with every mile that stretched out on the desolate road ahead. The incident at the rundown gas station, with its flickering lights and the odd, nearly incomprehensible mutterings of the attendant, lingered in his mind like a bad aftertaste. He had tried to dismiss the old man's warnings about the road ahead as mere superstition. But as the darkness seemed to press in around his car, those words echoed ominously in his head. The radio, which had been his only source of comfort, suddenly erupted into a cacophony of static. Jake fiddled with the dials, trying to reclaim the soothing voice of the late-night radio host. But it was no use. The static seemed to grow more aggressive, almost as if it were alive, whispering indistinct words that he couldn't quite make out. Jake's heart began to race. The sense of isolation was almost suffocating. As he rounded a particularly sharp bend, the headlights caught something in the distance. A figure standing at the edge of the road, almost blending into the darkness. Jake's first instinct was to stop, to offer help to a stranded traveler. But something in the pit of his stomach told him to keep driving. As he passed the figure, he couldn't shake the feeling of eyes watching him, piercing through the darkness and into the very core of his being. Trying to shake off the unease, Jake focused on the road ahead, but the car's headlights began to flicker, casting long, dancing shadows across the asphalt. Each flicker seemed to distort the road ahead, making it difficult to tell where the road ended and the darkness began. Jake's pulse quickened. The car felt like the only real thing in a world that was quickly succumbing to shadow. Without warning, the car lurched as if hitting an unseen obstacle. Jake fought to maintain control, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. The car came to a shuddering halt, the engine dying with a final, gasping cough. Jake tried to restart it, but it was futile. The car was as dead as the night surrounding him. Panic began to set in as Jake realized he was stranded, alone in the pitch-black night. The sense of being watched returned, stronger than before, and he could almost hear the soft tread of footsteps approaching the car from the darkness. He locked the doors and reached for his phone, only to find it dead, despite having charged it before leaving. The last thing Jake saw before the story breaks was a faint glimmer of light approaching the car from the darkness. Its source, indiscernible. Was it a sign of rescue or something far more sinister? The line between reality and nightmare blurred as the darkness seemed to whisper his name, inviting him into its embrace. The story hangs in the balance, leaving Jake's fate and the true nature of the night's terrors a mystery, waiting to be continued. As the faint glimmer of light drew nearer, Jake's heart pounded against his ribcage, a frenzied rhythm that seemed to sync with the approaching footsteps. The light, initially a speck in the consuming darkness, began to take shape, morphing into the silhouette of a lantern held by an unseen figure. The air around Jake grew colder, a chill that seeped through the car's confines and clawed at his skin. With bated breath, Jake watched as the lantern's bearer came into view, a figure shrouded in tattered garments, its face obscured by the deep hood of its cloak. The figure paused a short distance from the car, its posture suggesting an eerie deliberation. Jake wanted to call out, to demand answers, but fear constricted his throat, muffling his voice to a mere whisper. The figure then extended a hand, palm up, towards the car, a gesture that felt both inviting and menacing. The lantern's light flickered, casting unsettling shadows that danced across the figure's cloak, making it seem as though it was surrounded by a swirling mist. Jake's mind raced with questions. Who was this figure, and what did it want with him? The sense of being trapped in a waking nightmare was palpable, the line between the real and the unreal blurring. Just as Jake mustered the courage to open the car door, the figure turned, its movement fluid and unnaturally graceful. It began to walk away, the lantern's light bobbing with its steps, beckoning Jake to follow into the darkness beyond the road. The urge to follow was almost overwhelming. A siren call that promised answers, yet hinted at untold horrors. Jake's hand trembled on the door handle, torn between the desire for safety and the drive to unravel the mystery of the night. The figure's pace was steady, unfaltering, and with each step, it seemed to blend further into the night, becoming part of the darkness itself. As Jake debated his next move, the night air was pierced by a distant, haunting melody, a tune that seemed both familiar and entirely alien. The sound seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, enveloping him in a sense of dread that was palpable. The melody beckoned, promising solace in the darkness, yet every note carried an undercurrent of despair. Torn between the call of the mysterious figure and the eerie melody, Jake sat paralyzed in his car, the darkness pressing in from all sides. The story hangs in suspense, leaving Jake at the crossroads of fear and curiosity, with the night's secrets veiled in shadow, awaiting to be unveiled. The haunting melody wove through the darkness, ensnaring Jake's thoughts, pulling him towards an unknown destiny. With each note, the urge to step out of the car and follow the mysterious figure grew stronger, battling against the primal fear that screamed for him to stay put, to seek safety within the confines of his dead vehicle. Compelled by a force he couldn't understand, Jake's hand moved almost of its own accord, unlocking the car door with a soft click that sounded unnaturally loud in the oppressive silence of the night. The door creaked open, the sound slicing through the still air like a verdict being passed. The chill of the night caressed his skin, a cold reminder of the reality he was about to leave behind. Stepping out of the car, Jake's feet found the cold, hard ground. The darkness seemed to envelop him, a tangible presence that whispered of hidden dangers and secrets yet to be unveiled. The distant figure, now barely visible, continued its march into the night, the lantern's light a beacon in the overwhelming darkness. Driven by an insatiable curiosity and an unshakable sense of being drawn to something beyond his comprehension, Jake followed. Each step took him further from the safety of his car, deeper into the realm of shadows. The melody grew louder, a symphony of sorrow that seemed to echo the very essence of the night. The path before him was unclear, shrouded in darkness and uncertainty. But Jake pressed on, guided by the flickering light of the lantern and the haunting melody that seemed to speak directly to his soul. The night air was thick with anticipation, as if the very world was holding its breath, waiting for the climax of a story yet to be told. As Jake ventured deeper into the darkness, the boundaries between the known and the unknown blurred. The familiar world fading away to be replaced by a landscape that defied logic and reason. Shadows moved with a life of their own, twisting and shifting in ways that made Jake question his sanity. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the light from the lantern vanished, plunging Jake into complete darkness. The melody, too, faded into a silence so profound it felt like a physical weight upon his chest, alone in the dark, with no light to guide him and no sound to follow. Jake stood on the threshold of the unknown, the story poised on the edge of an abyss, waiting for the next chapter to illuminate the path ahead. Jake's hand hovered over the door's handle, the whispers crescendoing into an urgent cacophony that seemed to pulse with anticipation. The air around him felt charged, electric, as if the very act of reaching for the door was a transgression against the natural order of this shadow realm. Yet, the inexplicable pull toward what lay beyond was overwhelming. A siren call to the unknown that Jake found impossible to resist. With a deep, steadying breath, Jake grasped the handle. It was cold to the touch, an icy chill that seeped into his bones, yet it felt oddly comforting, a tangible connection to the surreal world he found himself in. The door creaked open with a slow, deliberate movement, as if it had not been disturbed in an age. Beyond the door was darkness so profound, it seemed to swallow the light emanating from the doorway. A darkness that was alive, breathing, and watching. Jake peered into the abyss, searching for a sign, a hint of what awaited him. But the void offered no answers, only the promise of deeper mysteries. As Jake stood on the threshold, the whispers fell silent, replaced by a palpable sense of expectation. It was as though the very fabric of this place was holding its breath, waiting for his decision. The choice to step through the doorway felt monumental, a pivotal moment that could alter the course of his reality, with a resolve born of a mixture of fear, curiosity, and an unshakable feeling of being drawn forward by forces beyond his understanding. Jake stepped through the doorway. The instant his foot crossed the threshold, the door vanished, leaving no trace it had ever existed. He found himself standing in a space that defied description, a place where the concepts of inside and outside lost their meaning. The darkness here was different, thicker, almost tangible, yet it did not impede his vision. Instead, it seemed to warp the very air, creating a landscape that was both alien and strangely familiar. In the distance, a faint light glimmered, a beacon in the oppressive gloom. Unlike the door's light, this illumination had a warmth to it, a soft glow that hinted at safety, or perhaps a deeper horror masked by an inviting facade. The whispers returned, now a gentle murmur that seemed to guide him toward the light. With each step, the ground beneath him felt less solid, more like a mist that swirled and shifted with his movements. The air was filled with a low hum, a vibration that resonated with his very soul, pulling him forward with an inexorable force. As Jake moved toward the light, the darkness began to recede, revealing glimpses of a world that was both beautiful and terrifying. Shadows danced at the edge of his vision, forms that seemed to shift and change, hinting at truths too vast for the human mind to comprehend. The story hangs in this moment of transition, leaving Jake and the reader on the cusp of discovery. The path ahead, shrouded in mystery and the promise of revelations that could unravel the fabric of reality itself. As Jake ventured closer to the source of the warm glow, the ethereal landscape around him began to solidify, taking on more defined shapes and forms. The once intangible mist underfoot now felt like soft earth, damp and yielding. The air, filled with the low, resonant hum, seemed to thrum with an energy that was both exhilarating and unnerving. The light, now clearly emanating from a lantern hanging on an ancient, gnarled tree, bathed the area in a golden hue, casting long, dancing shadows that seemed to play tricks on the eye. The tree itself was massive, its twisted limbs reaching out as if in supplication to some unseen force. The bark etched with symbols that seemed to shift and move in the lantern's flickering light. Beneath the tree sat an old woman, her features obscured by the shadows, rocking gently in a creaky wooden chair. The murmuring whispers seemed to emanate from her, blending with the hum of the night to create a melody that was hauntingly beautiful. She appeared to be waiting for Jake, her presence an anchor in the shifting landscape. As Jake approached, the old woman lifted her head, and he could see her eyes, deep, endless pools that reflected the starlit sky. A universe within that held both wisdom and sorrow. She beckoned him closer with a gnarled hand, her movements slow and deliberate. "Welcome, traveler." Her voice was like the rustle of dry leaves, carrying with it the weight of ages. "You stand at the threshold of realms beyond your ken. What seeks you in the embrace of the night?" Jake found himself unable to speak, his questions and fears tangled in his throat. The old woman's gaze pierced through him, reading his soul as easily as one might read a book. "You carry a burden, a quest for understanding," she continued, her eyes never leaving his. "But beware, for not all truths are meant to be known, and some doors, once opened, can never be closed." The air around them grew colder, and the shadows cast by the lantern began to writhe and twist, forming shapes that were at once familiar and utterly alien. Jake realized that he was standing at the crossroads of reality, where the veil between worlds was thin and the choices he made could echo through the ages. The story teeters on the brink of revelation, the path ahead shrouded in mystery and fraught with peril. Jake's journey through the night is far from over, and the choices he faces will determine not just his fate, but the very nature of the reality he inhabits. Drawn inexorably towards the enigmatic glow, Jake felt the ground beneath him solidify with each tentative step, as if reality itself was reconstructing around him, stitching together a path through the void. The murmur of the whispers grew more coherent, no longer just a cacophony of sounds, but a chorus of voices, each one telling a fragment of a story that seemed to weave into the very essence of this place. The light, now clearer and more radiant, revealed itself to be emanating from a structure that defied architectural norms. It was a house, or at least the semblance of one, crafted from a material that shimmered with an inner light, its walls undulating as if breathing. The structure seemed both ancient and possibly advanced, a paradox that beckoned Jake closer with its silent allure. As he approached, the voices crescendoed into a symphony of whispers, each word imbued with an emotion that Jake could feel in his bones. The air around the structure pulsed with energy, a palpable force that resonated with the light spilling from its windows and doorways. Compelled by an unknown force, Jake reached out to touch the structure's surface. The moment his fingertips brushed against it, a surge of images flooded his mind visions of other times, other places, a kaleidoscope of realities that blurred the line between the physical and the ethereal. Each vision was a snapshot of a story, a life, a moment of joy or despair, all interconnected in the web of existence that spanned beyond this mysterious realm. Reeling from the onslaught of visions, Jake stumbled back, his breath catching in his throat. The house, if it could be called that, seemed to pulse in response, its glow intensifying as if inviting him to explore its depths, to uncover the secrets it held within its otherworldly walls. The whispers now seemed to beckon him forward, urging him to step inside, to lose himself in the labyrinth of corridors and rooms that promised answers, but might just as easily devour him in their embrace. The threshold of the house stood before him, a gateway between the known and the unknowable, a precipice upon which the next chapter of his journey teetered. With the fabric of reality and the essence of existence hanging in the balance, Jake found himself at a crossroads, the story pausing at the brink of a revelation that could shatter the boundaries of his understanding. The path ahead was veiled in shadow, the outcome uncertain, leaving the narrative suspended in a moment of anticipation, waiting for the courage to take the next step into the unknown. hovering at the edge of decision. Jake's hand trembled as he contemplated the threshold before him. The house, with its pulsating walls and the ethereal glow seeping through its openings, seemed to call out to him, a siren song woven from the very fabric of the unknown. The air around him thrummed with a power that felt ancient, a resonance from a time and place beyond his comprehension. Taking a deep, steadying breath, Jake stepped forward, crossing the boundary that separated the outside from the inside of this enigmatic structure. As his foot crossed the threshold, the atmosphere shifted palpably. The air inside was warmer, imbued with a subtle vibration that seemed to echo the beating of his heart. The interior of the house was a contradiction, both vast and intimate, with corridors that stretched far beyond what the exterior suggested. The walls were lined with artifacts that defied age, each piece pulsating with its own inner light, casting shadows that danced and twisted in the corners of Jake's vision. The whispers that had guided him here were now a constant presence, a chorus of voices that seemed to emanate from the very walls of the house. They spoke in a language that Jake felt on the verge of understanding, each word a piece of a puzzle that his mind scrambled to assemble. Drawn deeper into the heart of the structure, Jake found himself in a room that appeared to be a library, its shelves laden with tomes that radiated a soft, otherworldly light. The books were bound in materials that ranged from the familiar to the utterly alien, their titles inscribed in scripts that danced before his eyes, elusive and ever-changing. As he reached out to touch one of the volumes, the room shifted subtly, the walls blurring and reforming into a new configuration. It was as if the house itself was alive, responding to his presence, guiding him on a journey through its labyrinthine interior. The narrative of the story, much like the path through the house, twisted and turned, leading Jake and the reader deeper into a maze of revelations and mysteries. Each step forward peeled back layers of reality, revealing truths that were as beautiful as they were terrifying. The story pauses here, on the cusp of discovery, leaving Jake enveloped in the mystery of the house that defies time and space. The next chapter remains unwritten, a promise of deeper explorations into the unknown, where the line between horror and wonder blurs into obscurity. In the shifting room of endless books, Jake felt a profound sense of displacement, as if the very fabric of his reality was being woven and rewoven with each step he took. The whispers grew in intensity, now a constant hum in his ears, a soundtrack to the surreal journey he found himself on. The library, with its pulsing tomes and morphing shelves, seemed to breathe with a life of its own, each breath reshaping the space around him. Compelled by an unseen force, Jake reached for one of the glowing books. The moment his fingers brushed against its spine, the room stilled, the whispers silenced. The book opened in his hands, its pages a cascade of light and shadow, each word a living thing that leapt from the paper to dance before his eyes. The text was indecipherable, yet it conveyed emotions and images directly to Jake's mind, a flood of memories and visions that were not his own. As he turned the pages, the room around him began to dissolve, the walls and shelves fading into a mist that swirled and coalesced into into new shapes, Jake found himself standing in a different part of the house. A room that seemed to serve as a crossroads. Multiple doorways leading off in all directions, each promising a different path through the unknown. The air here was charged, the silence punctuated by the soft creaks and sighs of the house, as if it were communicating with him, guiding him. The doorways glowed with a soft light, each a different hue, beckoning him to choose a path. Jake stood at the crossroads, the weight of decision heavy upon him. The house, with its endless corridors and shifting rooms, was a puzzle that demanded to be solved, a labyrinth that promised both enlightenment and peril. The whispers returned, softer now, a gentle urging that felt like a nudge in the back of his mind. With a mixture of trepidation and resolve, Jake stepped towards one of the doorways, the light from within casting strange shadows across his face. As he crossed the threshold, the ground beneath his feet seemed to shift, the world tilting as he was pulled into a new reality. The story hangs in this moment of transition, leaving Jake on the verge of another discovery, another layer of the mystery that wrapped around him like a shroud. The narrative remains open, a thread waiting to be picked up and woven into the tapestry of this unfolding horror story, where the boundaries of reality are stretched thin and the unknown beckons with a dark allure. As Jake stepped through the doorway, the light enveloped him, pulling him into its embrace. The world around him twisted, reality bending in ways that defied logic. When the light finally receded, Jake found himself standing in the heart of the house, a vast chamber where the walls pulsed with a life of their own. The whispers now a deafening roar in his ears. In the center of the chamber stood a mirror, its surface rippling like the surface of a pond, disturbed by a gentle breeze. Drawn to it as if by an invisible tether, Jake approached, his reflection appearing and disappearing in the undulating glass. As he stood before the mirror, the whispers coalesced into a single, intelligible voice, chilling in its clarity. "The truth you seek lies within," it said, a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Tentatively, Jake reached out a hand towards the mirror's surface. The moment his fingers touched it, the room exploded into light, a blinding flash that consumed everything. When the light faded, Jake found himself standing not in the heart of the mysterious house, but by the side of the desolate road where his journey had begun. The night was silent, the darkness complete, save for the faint glow of his car's headlights in the distance. Confused and disoriented, Jake stumbled back to his car, the memories of the house and its impossible rooms fading like a dream upon waking. He drove off into the night, the road stretching out before him, empty and unending. But as the miles passed, a creeping realization dawned on Jake. The world around him seemed subtly altered. The familiar landscapes of his journey home now imbued with an otherworldly quality. Shadows moved in the corners of his vision, and the night seemed alive with whispered voices that only he could hear. The horror of his situation became clear. Jake had emerged from the house, but it had not let him go. The boundaries between his world and the dark realm he had traversed had blurred, the horrors of the night spilling over into his reality. As the story closes, Jake's fate remains uncertain. His life now a twisted echo of the nightmare he thought he had escaped. The house, with its shifting corridors and whispering walls, had claimed him in ways he could never have imagined, leaving him to navigate a world where the shadows held terrors that were all too real. The horror of his experience lingered, a chilling reminder that some doors, once opened, can never truly be closed.